In the landscape of early Christianity, few threats were as insidious as those that arose from within the community of believers itself. The second epistle of John, though brief in length, addresses one of the most dangerous challenges facing the early church: false teaching that denied the true nature of Jesus Christ. Written with pastoral concern and theological precision, 2 John stands as a sentinel of doctrinal fidelity in an age of emerging heresies. 2 John chapter 1, verses 7 to 11, provides a particularly focused warning against those who would distort the truth about Jesus Christ, specifically targeting early Gnostic teachings that denied Christ's incarnation. In these 5 verses, the Apostle John offers not only a stern warning, but also practical guidance for how believers should respond to those who promote such dangerous falsehoods. As we examine this passage together, we will discover timeless principles for discerning truth from error, maintaining doctrinal integrity, and responding appropriately to false teaching, all while remaining firmly anchored in the love that characterizes authentic Christian faith. To fully appreciate John's concern in this passage, we must understand the historical backdrop against which he wrote. The late 1st century witnessed the emergence of various strains of proto-Gnosticism, philosophical and religious movements that would later develop into full-fledged Gnostic systems in the 2nd century. The term Gnosticism derives from the Greek word gnosis, meaning knowledge. This movement claimed to offer secret, specialized knowledge available only to spiritual elites. While Gnosticism eventually developed into complex systems, early forms were already infiltrating Christian communities during John's lifetime, presenting a significant threat to apostolic teaching. One of the core tenets of these early Gnostic teachings was a profound dualism between spirit and matter. Gnostics typically viewed the material world as inherently evil, created not by the supreme God, but by a lesser, often malevolent deity. Consequently, they could not accept that the true Christ, whom they considered purely spiritual, would actually inhabit physical flesh. They developed various theories to explain Jesus' apparent humanity. Some suggested he merely appeared to have a physical body, while others proposed that the divine Christ temporarily inhabited the human Jesus, but departed before the crucifixion. Such teachings directly undermined the foundational Christian belief in the incarnation, that the Word became flesh and dwelt among us. John 1:14. If Jesus did not truly come in the flesh, then his physical suffering and death could not provide atonement for sin. The resurrection would be meaningless, and the entire gospel message would collapse. It is against this dangerous backdrop that John writes with such urgency and clarity, identifying these false teachers not merely as misguided individuals, but as deceivers and even antichrists, those standing in direct opposition to the true Christ. Let's take a look at verse 7 now. It says, "For many deceivers have gone out into the world, and those who do not confess the coming of Jesus Christ in the flesh. Such a one is the deceiver and the Antichrist." John begins this section with a sobering warning. many deceivers have gone out into the world. The Greek term for deceivers carries the sense of those who lead others astray, causing them to wander from the truth. These aren't merely misguided teachers, but active agents of deception. What defined these deceivers? They do not confess the coming of Jesus Christ in the flesh. The Greek term for coming is a present participle, suggesting not merely Christ's initial advent, but his continual coming, encompassing his incarnation, ministry, death, resurrection, and return. These false teachers denied the fundamental truth that Jesus Christ, the eternal Son of God, had truly become human. Interestingly, John does not use the definite article when describing the deceiver and the Antichrist, suggesting he isn't identifying a single eschatological figure, but rather a category or spirit that manifests through multiple individuals. As he had written in his first epistle, "Children, it is the last hour, and as you have heard that Antichrist is coming, so now many Antichrists have come." 1 John 2:18. Here John wasn't referring to a single individual as the Antichrist, but rather to a group of people who denied Christ's true identity. These were particularly dangerous precisely because they operated within the Christian community, claiming to be believers while fundamentally rejecting the biblical Christ and replacing him with their own Gnostic version. Their denial wasn't merely intellectual disagreement, but struck at the heart of salvation itself. If Christ did not truly come in the flesh, then he could not truly die for our sins or be raised for our justification. As Irenaeus, an early Christian theologian who battled Gnosticism, wrote in his work Against Heresies, "For if he did not receive the substance of flesh from a human being, he neither was made man nor the Son of Man, and if he was not made what we were, he did no great thing in what he suffered and endured." Let's look now at verse 8. It says, "Watch yourselves, so that you may not lose what we have worked for, but may win a full reward." Having identified the threat, John now urges vigilance. Watch yourselves. This present imperative calls for ongoing active watchfulness, not paranoia, but spiritual alertness. The plural form indicates this is a community responsibility. What's at stake? John warns that they might lose what we have worked for and miss receiving a full reward. This raises important questions about what could be lost and what this reward entails. It's crucial to understand that John is not talking about salvation here. Nowhere in this passage does he mention salvation or suggest that eternal life hangs in the balance. Rather, he speaks of rewards, the fruit and results of faithful ministry and discipleship. This aligns with Jesus' teaching about storing up treasures in heaven, Matthew 6:20, and Paul's discussion of building on the foundation of Christ with materials that will either endure or be burned away, 1 Corinthians 3:10 through 15. The Greek term for reward often referred to wages earned by a worker. In Christian usage, it denotes divine recognition and blessing for faithful service. We find similar language in Jesus' parables about faithful servants receiving rewards proportionate to their diligence. Matthew 25, verses 14 to 30. The concept of full reward suggests completeness or perfection, not merely receiving something, but receiving it in its fullest measure. As noted in several ancient manuscripts, this could be rendered that we might not lose to things that we have worked for, but that we may receive a full reward, emphasizing the shared nature of both the work and the reward. What might diminish this reward? If believers embraced or tolerated false teaching, several consequences would follow. 1. The effectiveness of their witness would be compromised. 2. The spiritual growth of the church would be stunted. And 3. The truth of the gospel would be diluted or distorted. And 4. The fruit of apostolic labor would be partially undone. This verse underscores the reality that while salvation is by grace through faith, never earned or deserved, our faithfulness or unfaithfulness within that saved relationship has genuine consequences. God promises rewards for faithfulness that, while not affecting our salvation status, certainly affect our experience of eternity and perhaps our capacity to enjoy God's presence and participate in His ongoing work. Let's look at verse 9 now. It says, "Everyone who goes on ahead and does not abide in the teaching of Christ does not have God. Whoever abides in the teaching has both the Father and the Son." John now presents a stark contrast between those who go on ahead versus those who abide in the teaching. This comparison reveals much about the nature of true discipleship. The phrase "goes on ahead" literally means to go before or advance beyond established boundaries. This refers to going outside the boundary of belief in the true Christ and His commands. The false teachers claimed to possess advanced spiritual knowledge that moved beyond apostolic teaching. They didn't view themselves as rejecting Christ, but as advancing to a higher understanding of Him. This dangerous advancement stands in sharp contrast to abiding. This key Johannine term denotes remaining, continuing, or dwelling. Where false teachers claimed progressive revelation, John calls for persistent faithfulness to what had been delivered from the beginning. 1 John 2, verse 24. What precisely is the teaching of Christ in which believers must abide? This could be interpreted either as teaching about Christ or teaching from Christ. Given the context of combating false Christological claims, the primary reference is likely to the apostolic teaching about Christ's person and work, particularly regarding His incarnation. However, this would naturally include Christ's own teachings as faithfully transmitted by His apostles. The consequences John outlines are profound. Those who don't abide in this teaching do not have God. John doesn't say that they lose or no longer have God, but simply do not have Him, suggesting they never truly possessed Him in the first place. This aligns with 1 John 5, verse 12. Whoever has the Son has life. Whoever does not have the Son does not have life. Conversely, whoever abides in the teaching has both the Father and the Son. This dual possession emphasizes the inseparability of the Father and the Son. One cannot claim to know God while rejecting the incarnate Christ. As Jesus Himself declared, "No one comes to the Father except through me." John 14:6. The Greek construction here is particularly significant. John could have simply said one has God, but instead specifically mentions having both the Father and the Son. This precise phrasing undermines the Gnostic attempt to separate the true God from the incarnate Christ. True believers possess both in an indivisible relationship. Let's look at verses 10 to 11 now. It says, "If anyone comes to you and does not bring this teaching, do not receive him into your house or give him any greeting, for whoever greets him takes part in his wicked works." Having established the seriousness of the doctrinal error, John now provides practical guidance for responding to those who promote it. His instructions appear stark and uncompromising. Do not receive him into your house or give him any greeting. To grasp the full import of this command, we must understand both its cultural context and linguistic nuances. The phrase "do not receive" employs the present imperative, emphasizing an ongoing refusal to welcome false teachers. Similarly, "do not give any greeting" forbids even basic social courtesies that might imply endorsement. In first-century Christian communities, traveling teachers relied heavily on the hospitality of believers. Unlike modern society, with its abundance of commercial accommodations, ancient travelers depended on private homes for lodging, meals, and financial support. This practice had biblical precedent in Jesus' instructions to his disciples and continued as a key means of supporting apostolic ministry. However, this system of hospitality created vulnerability. By welcoming someone into one's home, especially as a teacher, one implicitly endorsed their message and provided resources for their continued ministry. False teachers exploited this system to spread their heretical views, gaining legitimacy and material support from well-meaning believers. John's prohibition aims to starve false teachers of both resources and credibility. By refusing to receive them or even greet them, believers would 1. Deny financial and material support for spreading falsehood, 2. Avoid implicitly endorsing their message, 3. Make clear to the church the seriousness of the doctrinal error, and 4. Protect vulnerable believers from exposure to dangerous teaching. The reason for this severe response is made clear in verse 11. Whoever greets him takes part in his wicked works. The Greek term for takes part indicates fellowship or partnership. To greet or host false teachers was to become complicit in their deception. This approach aligns with other New Testament passages addressing false teaching. Romans 16, verse 17, urges believers to watch out for those who cause divisions and create obstacles contrary to the doctrine that you have been taught. Avoid them. Titus 3, verse 10 says, "As for the person who stirs up division, after warning him once and then twice, have nothing more to do with him." These passages collectively establish a principle of protective separation from those who actively promote falsehood, particularly regarding core doctrines. As we conclude our study, we find ourselves at the intersection of doctrinal fidelity and Christian love. John's epistle reminds us that these are not opposing values, but complementary expressions of authentic faith. True love rejoices in the truth, 1 Corinthians 13:6, and seeks the genuine good of others, which must include concern for the right understanding of Christ. Conversely, True doctrine should never be wielded as a weapon, but offered as a gift with gentleness and respect. 1 Peter 3, verses 15 to 16. The challenges facing John's original audience remain remarkably relevant today. Though ancient Gnosticism has evolved into new forms, contemporary spirituality still divorces faith from physical reality, elevates subjective experience above revealed truth, rejects the exclusive claims of Christ, and minimizes sin while maximizing human potential, and also creates spiritual elitism through specialized knowledge. In this context, John's exhortation to watch yourselves remains urgently relevant. Doctrinal vigilance isn't optional, but essential for the church's health and mission. Yet this vigilance must be exercised in a spirit of humility and grace. We stand firm not because we are intellectually superior or morally better than others, but because we have received a precious deposit of truth to be guarded and shared. The ultimate goal is not merely correct doctrine, but a living relationship with the incarnate Christ who truly came in the flesh to save us. As we abide in his teaching, we experience the reality John describes, having both the Father and the Son, and discover that truth and love are not competitors, but companions on the path of discipleship. May we, like John's original readers, remain watchful against deception, steadfast in apostolic teaching, and motivated by genuine love, thus receiving the full reward promised to those who faithfully follow Christ in both belief and practice.